Have you ever imagined disappearing? Not in a dramatic way. Not necessarily because you want to die, but because you want everything to stop for a while. The responsibilities, the pressure, the constant noise in your head. Maybe you fantasize about packing a bag and moving somewhere nobody knows you. Maybe you imagine deleting every social media account and starting over. Or maybe, late at night, you picture yourself driving endlessly down an empty road with no destination at all. And for a moment, it feels comforting, like breathing after holding your breath for too long. If you've been daydreaming about escaping your life, psychology says this may be about something much deeper than laziness or irresponsibility. It may actually be your mind trying to survive, because sometimes the urge to escape isn't about wanting a different life. It's about wanting relief from the one you're emotionally trapped inside. And the scary part? A lot of people don't even realize how overwhelmed they are until their mind starts quietly fantasizing about disappearing. Psychologists sometimes describe this as emotional escapism. It's when your brain creates mental distance from stress, emotional pain, burnout, loneliness, or unresolved inner conflict. And honestly, your brain isn't trying to ruin your life when this happens. It's trying to protect you from emotional overload. Think about how many people live in survival mode without noticing it. You wake up tired. You go through routines mechanically. You answer messages while emotionally numb. You keep functioning, but internally, you feel disconnected from yourself. Like you're watching your own life happen from far away. And eventually, your mind starts searching for exits, not because you're weak, but because your nervous system is exhausted. This is especially common in people who spent most of their lives being emotionally responsible for everyone else. The strong friend, the people pleaser, the child who had to grow up too fast, the person who learned to suppress emotions to avoid becoming a burden. When you've spent years ignoring your own emotional needs, your inner world eventually starts screaming for freedom. But it doesn't always scream loudly. Sometimes it whispers through fantasies. What if I just disappeared for a while? What if I started over somewhere else? What if I became a completely different person? And maybe you've noticed this feeling becoming stronger lately, especially when you're overwhelmed. Because escapist fantasies tend to intensify when reality feels emotionally inescapable. Your brain starts creating emotional doorways, even imaginary ones. This is why people often romanticize isolated cabins, road trips, beach towns, forests, quiet apartments, or anonymous cities where nobody knows them. Those fantasies are rarely just about the location itself. They're about emotional permission, permission to rest, permission to stop performing, permission to exist without pressure. In psychology, there's also something called maladaptive daydreaming. This happens when fantasy becomes a coping mechanism for emotional distress. People who experience it often create detailed inner worlds to temporarily escape stress, loneliness, trauma, or emotional dissatisfaction. And while daydreaming itself isn't unhealthy, constantly needing to mentally escape your real life can sometimes signal unmet emotional needs underneath the surface. Because here's the truth. Healthy people don't usually fantasize about disappearing from lives that feel emotionally safe. And maybe that's difficult to hear. But if your mind constantly wants out, it may be trying to tell you something important. Maybe your life looks functional from the outside, but emotionally it doesn't feel sustainable anymore. And sometimes the urge to escape isn't even about your environment. It's about your identity. There are people walking around every day, living lives that don't actually feel like theirs. Careers they chose to please others. Relationships where they feel emotionally unseen. Personalities built around survival instead of authenticity. After enough time, that disconnect creates emotional suffocation. You begin mourning a version of yourself you never got to become, and that grief can show up as escapism. This is actually something existential psychology talks about often. The idea that human beings suffer deeply when they feel disconnected from meaning, freedom, or authenticity. Existential psychologist Rollo May once wrote that the opposite of courage in our society is not cowardice, it's conformity. And maybe that's why some people feel strangely emotional watching movies where characters leave everything behind to find themselves. Because part of them wants to do the same, not necessarily physically, but emotionally. They want to reconnect with who they were before survival mode took over. Anime explores this feeling surprisingly well too. Take Spirited Away. Chihiro enters a strange world where she slowly loses her identity, even forgetting her own name. And isn't that what emotional burnout sometimes feels like? You become so consumed by expectations, pressure, and survival that you stop recognizing yourself. Or look at Shinji from Neon Genesis Evangelion, a character constantly struggling between wanting connection and wanting to disappear from the pain of being perceived, rejected, and emotionally overwhelmed. A lot of people secretly relate to that more than they'd ever admit. Because disappearing can feel easier than constantly carrying emotional exhaustion nobody else seems to notice. But here's something important. Escapism becomes dangerous when fantasy replaces emotional action. Because while your mind may dream about a new life, the deeper healing usually begins by changing the emotional conditions of your current one. And that's hard, sometimes harder than running away. Because healing often requires grieving the years you spent abandoning yourself, grieving the pressure you normalized, grieving relationships where you couldn't fully be yourself, grieving how tired you've actually become. A lot of people never allow themselves to admit they're exhausted because they've been praised their whole life for enduring things silently. But endurance is not the same thing as happiness. And surviving is not the same thing as living. So if you've been fantasizing about escaping lately, maybe instead of judging yourself for it, try becoming curious. Ask yourself, what part of my life feels emotionally unbearable right now? What am I constantly trying to escape from? When was the last time I actually felt emotionally safe? What version of myself feels trapped? Because sometimes the fantasy itself contains clues about what your soul needs. You constantly imagine quiet places. Maybe your nervous system needs rest. If you fantasize about anonymity, maybe you're exhausted from pressure and expectations. If you imagine becoming someone entirely different, maybe you've outgrown the version of yourself built for survival. And maybe that's not failure, maybe that's awareness. Carl Jung believed that many psychological struggles come from living too far away from our authentic selves. The more disconnected you become from who you truly are, the more psychological tension builds internally. And eventually, your mind starts begging for escape. Not because you're broken, but because something inside you knows you cannot continue like this forever. And honestly, some forms of escape are healthy. Resting is healthy. Creating boundaries is healthy. Change in environments is healthy. Taking breaks is healthy. Leaving toxic situations is healthy. Sometimes your desire to escape is not irrational. Sometimes it's wisdom your exhausted mind is trying to communicate before burnout completely consumes you. But here's the difference. Healing isn't about disappearing from your life overnight. It's about slowly building a life you no longer need to constantly escape from. A life where your nervous system can finally unclench. A life where you don't have to earn rest through exhaustion. A life where you feel emotionally present instead of emotionally absent. And that healing usually starts smaller than people expect. Maybe it's finally admitting you're unhappy. Maybe it's saying no without apologizing. Maybe it's resting without guilt. Maybe it's letting yourself feel emotions you've suppressed for years. Maybe it's asking for help. Tiny moments of honesty can completely change the direction of a person's life, because the opposite of escapism isn't forcing yourself to stay trapped. It's creating emotional safety. And if you've spent most of your life surviving emotionally, that process may feel unfamiliar at first, even uncomfortable. Some people are so used to chaos that peace initially feels empty. Some people are so used to emotional neglect that self-care feels selfish. And some people are so used to performing strength that vulnerability feels terrifying. But slowly, your nervous system can learn that life does not always have to feel like something you're trying to run away from. Slowly, you can reconnect with yourself again. Not the version of you built to survive, the real you underneath all the exhaustion. So if you've been daydreaming about escaping your life lately, maybe your mind isn't trying to destroy your future. Maybe it's trying to save you from disappearing emotionally inside your present. And maybe this isn't the end of your story. Maybe it's the first moment you're finally becoming aware of how deeply you need care, rest, honesty, and change. Not because you're weak, but because you've been strong for too long. If this video resonated with you, you might also relate to our video on signs you're emotionally exhausted without realizing it. And if you're comfortable, tell us in the comments, if you could escape somewhere peaceful for one day, where would you go? Sometimes even imagining safety is the first step toward creating it. And wherever you are right now, take a breath. You're allowed to want more than survival.